Dear friends, professional colleagues and students, today we are going to organize second series of BLA webinar 2020 and I am Joydeep Chando. On behalf of Bengal Library Association, want to welcome you all in this session of BLA webinar. You must be well aware that Bengal Library Association was established under the presidency of poet Rabindranath Tagore in 1925 and it is one of the oldest library associations in India. From its inception, it is working towards the development of library and its profession. Not only that, it regularly organizes training programs, workshops, seminars, conferences and prestigious INT-Koha once in every 2 years. It is being engaged towards installation and customization of Koha, DSpace, look up the task of the migration from different software to Koha, retroconversion work and the like. During the period of lockdown, we are planning to organize different web-based seminars, popularly termed as webinars. And for this, we are very much grateful to our BLA technical team, especially Mr. Sujan Saha and Mr. Vishwaranjan Manna. Those look after the whole task, actually the technical task of accomplishment this project. We are also thankful to our well-wishers, our supporters, BLA Executive Committee members for their active support and cooperation. Today's topic of discussion is library carpentry. It is quite new coinage to us and the speaker is respected Professor Parthasarathi Mukhopadhyay. At present, he is the head of the DLIS, University of Koldani, West Bengal, India. He is a highly technical person and he was working in a scientific library in Kolkata. Then he took teaching as his profession. I have to mention his past profession because he is the key person who has the capability of the knowledge of the requirement of modern library and its technical solutions. I have mentioned here that when we didn't know actually what is a Koha, what is Koha or DSpace, GSDL, etc., he was working at that time for their popularization. He gives us his kind consent for deliberation of 3 lectures in this series and we are very much grateful to him. Last but not the least, we are very much grateful to you, the participants. According to information, participants from different corners of the country are willing to participate in this particular webinar. Not only that, participants from outside India, from Pakistan, from EAU, from Tanzania, from other countries of world are willing to participate in this program. So we are very much grateful to you. And in case of any query, any suggestion, feel free to communicate with us through our official mail ID of this webinar or you can contact us through our official email ID of Bengal Library Association, that is blacal.org@gmail.com. Be associated with us, be a member of Bengal Library Association, love library, love profession, so that all together with you we can do for the betterment of the profession. Thank you once again and namaskar.
So welcome to the BLA webinar 2020. It is series 2. It deals with library carpentry. On behalf of BLA and on behalf of myself, I welcome you all at first. And let us all thank to the team BLA for this time befitting initiative to spread LIS education and training in this lockdown period. In this session 2 of webinar, you already know the broad title is library carpentry, and library carpentry is a peculiar term, as we all know, but this particular term has its recent origin from data carpentry, and it deals with all kind of skill requirement for LIS professionals for handling large data sets, for gathering data from external sources automatically, to extract data from gathered data sets efficiently to produce information. So in this session 1, the entire talk will be divided into 3 logical sections. First, I am going to introduce you with different concepts associated with the library carpentry. You may consider it's a theoretical foundation before making a quantum jump into the practical sections of data wrangling. In the next logical section, I am going to introduce this downloading and installation of OpenDefine, both for a standalone machine like a laptop or desktop, or if you want to run OpenDefine in a LAN environment, what are the requirements, how to set it up. That will be the second logical section. And in the third logical section, I will be dealing with a simple case study where I will take a set of article data sets having DOI, and then I will show you how to gather data automatically related to that journal article, and automatically how can we determine the open access status, open access color, open access licensing associated with that data sets. So in the next 2 sessions of webinar, the date and time will be announced later. I will be dealing with the in the next webinar I will be dealing with the MARC records, how to deal with the MARC records to gather additional information and repack it. And in the third webinar, it will be little bit challenging and much more complex also. I will be showing you that how can you export a poorly formatted MARC record from your ILS, bring it to our data wrangling software, and then you can extract different name authority and subject authority from external sources like FAST, faceted application of subject terminology, or from Library of Congress name authority file, VIAP, etc. Then you standardized your MARC data sets, and then you can repack it and then finally import into your ILS. So it will be little bit complex, so let us start with the simple one. Okay, so let's start. Okay, so let us start this webinar series, and or otherwise let us come to the business. Okay, so before starting this particular theoretical foundation as a first logical section of this webinar, if you can see here, this is the BLA MOOC website. So in the session 1, if you click there, you will be having the topic, and during this presentation, one chat session will be opened. That you can join me with the live chat. So another option we have given discussion and questioning, so that if you have any question, you can click here, you can post your question, you will be getting your response within 7 days. And after that there will be a link called feedback. So don't worry, I have given a small set of questions, 5 to 6 number of questions to collect your feedback so that we can improve this service in future. Okay, so let us start our presentation on data wrangling. So as I said, that library carpentry is a peculiar term, but presently it is gaining importance presently it is gaining importance from different quarter. So library carpentry actually originated from a bigger initiative called the Carpentries. It includes three sub facets. One is called data carpentry, second is library carpentry, and third one is the software carpentry. So library carpentry has a direct origin, or you can say the parent is data carpentry, and data carpentry actually stands to indicate different kind of fundamental data skills requirement to conduct research. So it's a very important for the researcher, particularly in the field of science and technology, financial analysis, etc. Now as library carpentry is originated from data carpentry, so what does it include? So library carpentry focuses on building software and data skills within library and information related community. So the main purpose is to empower LIS professionals to use different kind of software and data available inside the software to transfer one data sets into another format. These are all nowadays required, and we are doing it on daily basis. But today what I am going to show you that how can you do it more efficiently, and many new innovative things you can do with these basic skills related to data science, principles of data science, and technologies related to data science. So the you can go through this librarycarpentry.org. You can see here the address is given. If you go to this librarycarpentry.org, possibly many of you already searched after the announcement of the topic by BLA. So if you go to this particular site, you can see different kind of initiatives taken by them. So according to that particular website, the objective of library carpentry is application of data science principle, tools and technology to perform different kind of libraries tasks, to identify best practices in data structuring. That is a very important thing. Those who already know CDSICs, you can remember that this FDT or field definition table, that is basically a data structuring technique, how important it was to develop bibliographic database. So MARC is also a kind of data structuring, your CCF is also a kind of data structuring, Dublin Core is also a kind of data structuring. So all metadata structure or metadata schema is a smaller part of data structuring technology. So again, the objective is to how to transform and map data from one format to another format. Data visualization is coming in a big way. In one part of my presentation, I will show how data wrangling techniques can be linked with text analysis and can produce beautiful data visualization or tag cloud, etc. Nowadays, many of the library automation software, digital library software also includes tag cloud kind of thing. So if you know the data science terms and technology, you can work more effectively with your clients who are researcher, IT specialist, your faculty colleagues, etc. It's a very important thing coming up, particularly in case of academic libraries. And obviously, the last objective is to automate the tasks which are repetitive and error prone. Manually, if you are going to do it, you are bound to do different kind of errors, because human brain is not meant for that kind of repetitive task. So we can utilize different kind of data wrangling tools for the better curation of data and to provide effective information services on the basis of curated data. Now the library carpentry, as they are taking a lead in training and education of different concepts related to the bigger picture, so they have actually planned the entire education and teaching related to library carpentry in 3 levels. So in the correlations part, or you can say it's a level 1 skill requirement, they proposed working with data, and a very important concept they introduced, that is called regular expression, and what we normally call regex. Then Unix cell programming is coming next. So cell programming, as you know, you are nowadays library professionals are most of them are utilizing open source operating systems, different flavors of Linux like Ubuntu, CentOS, etc. So Unix cell programming is a good to know. for data handling tasks. Then the next they propose to learn a data wrangling software called OpenRefine. OpenRefine is a this particular tool first developed by Google as Google Refine. Then it is now available as an open source application software, and that is a data wrangling software called OpenRefine, freely available, and you can install very easily. So and the next one is the introduction to JIT, so that you can install very easily in your local machine different kind of Python libraries through JIT based installation. In the second level they are proposing SQL you already know, we are utilizing. In the last webinar you have learned that how you can utilize PostgreSQL, the backend database for displays, how you can take backup, how you can restore, etc. Then the next two important concepts are tidy data and web scraping. Tidy data means a messy data, a group of non-clean data. So how can we clean that data set? How can we curate that particular data sets? It comes under the purview of library carpentry. Web scraping means collecting a set of structured data from non-structured data sets. Say for example, web pages. Web pages are mainly written in HTML format. They are not structured. XML is structured, but HTML is not structured. So we can utilize different kind of web scraping technologies. It's a part of library carpentry to collect meaningful data inside the text. Then in the next level, in the next topic they propose the introduction to Python. Python nowadays is coming in as a big way for science and technology research. So little bit of Python knowledge is required for data wrangling. Don't worry, I am not demanding that you need to know Python, but little bit of Python experience, how to start a file, how to install a Python library, how to run a Python program that are required. And next is the data archiving technology. So nowadays I will show you data repository and data search engines are coming in a big way. So how they archive data, what should be the metadata of data sets, how metadata is important for data set. These are all comes under the discussion of data archiving. But at the third level or at the conceptual level, they proposed MarcEdit, how MarcEdit and OpenRefine can be joined together so that we can process a set of MARC records inside OpenRefine. And similarly, MARC records can be imported to OpenRefine. Similarly, OpenRefine will export data, and that can be packed back as a MARC record so that we can utilize inside our ILS. So that is a big way. Possibly my second webinar will be dealing with that. Then how can we go for different kind of data reconciliation with Wikidata, with DBpedia, with Library of Congress subject heading. That is called Wikidata or data collection, data gathering, and altogether that is called data reconciliation. And fair data principle, fair data in principles I am going to cover in the next slide. Introduction to R is it's an open source software, a statistical software package, much powerful in comparison with the other packages like we are using presently, like SPSS or the open source version of SPSS, that is called PSPP. So R is much powerful. So your basic knowledge about R is always a requirement, and of course the classic XML. Okay. So all these three levels of lessons they proposed will be based on the FAIR principles. Now what is FAIR? FAIR, F stands for findable, A stands for accessible, I stands for interoperable, and R stands for reusable. So all we are going to learn here, all information services we are producing from the available open data sets, those must be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So let us see what are the number of workshops library carpentry organized in collaboration with different other institutions. You can, if you go through the list, all big names are there. One is the Library of Congress, and you can have a look of this particular site, librarycarpentry.org/past workshop, to have a list. I have given only a few here. So 50+ workshops they have already conducted on library carpentry. and we in India we are slightly lagging behind in LIS departments. We still do not teach data science techniques and principles, but we are planning to have a soft core paper from the next academic sessions. We are working hard for the last 6 and 7 months for gathering and for organizing this data science. Particularly data science is a huge thing, particularly data science techniques and principles related to LIS. So this is the library carpentry at GitHub. So they have a GitHub site, all kind of software and data you can have from here. So if you go to the GitHub site and if you scroll down, you can see that all the workshops they have conducted are listed there. If I click this LC Open Define workshop, so it will be produce this kind of screens. So all schedules, when it was conducted, then what are the materials available, all are free to download. You can go through in your leisure time if you are getting interested in this emerging domain of LIS, that is the data wrangling. Now as I talked about that next 2 sections of this presentation will be based on case studies. So before making a quantum jump into case studies related to books and articles, we need to know a few concepts. So first very important concept is the fair data principle. As I already said, findable, accessible, interoperable and reusable. In case of findable, there are 4 principles. So all these principles are saying us that data must have metadata. Say for example, in fact data is not complete without metadata. For example, I am giving you just an example. If I say you that 721, does it mean anything to you? Now if I say number of participants of session 2 is equal to 721, so that carries some meaning to you. So that number of participants of session 2 is equal to 721. 721 is the data and number of participants is basically the metadata or label. If you do not keep this label, then there is no meaning of this data. So that's why the first principle is saying. So data must have a rich metadata. Definitely bigger is the better. And metadata must include, that is very important, the F3 principle, the metadata must include at least one element which uniquely identify a data object. For example, if you consider book as a data object, e-book as a data object, the ISBN is the unique identifier and your metadata must include the ISBN value of that particular object. If you consider a journal article as a digital electronic journal article is a data, it's a data object. So DOI or digital object identifier which uniquely identifies that particular journal article is required when you are describing the data sets of article. So if we come to the next, data must be accessible. You see this metadata must be indexed, should be able, we should able to index metadata, we should able to search metadata. So accessibility and findability, in one point these two things are same. It must be searchable, it must be accessible, and you see accessibility has another kind of facet, that means that each persistent URL, then API for negotiating content negotiation protocol like API, all must be available as open standards. That is also very important. And second important thing is that metadata of data object must be available for searching and access if the provider withdrawn the data set. This is very important for science and technology. Suppose today one researcher utilized one genomic database available in the public domain and based his or her work on that particular thing. Now that agency after some time withdrawn that data sets. So there, if metadata is not available in the public domain to declare the erstwhile existence of that particular data object, then that researcher will be in trouble. So if data set is withdrawn, then also the metadata must be available and must be accessible. That is the principle of accessibility. Then interoperability, you all know, we are daily practicing through In fact, in LIS Professional, we started interoperability business right from 1985 when ISO 2709 came into existence. So interoperability is the ability of software and system to interact with each other so that you can transfer your data set from one software to another software, from one format to another format. So these are very important things. And a part of the FAIR principle, data must be interoperable. That means it must be software independent, it must be platform independent, it must be format independent, so that I can transfer a particular data set for available in one format in another format. And on the basis, if your data set is interoperable, then it is also possible to make it reusable, so that data set can be repurposed. So I can utilize external data set for repurposing. For example, Amazon cover page is available as open data sets. So you have already seen that how Koha is making a mashup with Amazon cover pages and on the fly generating cover page images from Amazon of your locally available book records. So these are called repurposing and reusability of data, and this is altogether, this findability, in accessibility, interoperability and reusability is called FAIR data. So next important concept is data repository. Now most of the science and technology initiatives produce lot of data. So previously they publish only papers. Now one 3-page papers may include 2 GB of data. Now what the present trend is that you publish your paper in a journal, textual paper, but the data set must also be available in different open data repository. So some big repositories are coming up nowadays. Dryad digital repository, then Figshare is there. Harvard University created Dataverse, but my personal favorite is the open data repository, which is called Zenodo. So Zenodo actually is a free platform where any researcher can register and can upload their records, and it will be available in the public domain for access. Then data repository is are islands. So for example, suppose I want to search all gene sequencing data sets from all throughout the world. So I need to go from one repository to another repository. So I need to roam around to different data repositories for making an exclusive search on gene sequencing data sets. Instead of that, we can have data search engines. Nowadays, recently Google started Google Dataset search engine. Then similarly Kaggle is there, and my personal favorite is Kaggle for data set searching. So if we go to the next screen, you can see zenodo.org, where you can register and you can deposit your research data. Or otherwise, if you don't have any data set to deposit, you can search and you can retrieve data sets in different formats. Say for example, I recently make a query to Zenodo, how many tweets are available on coronavirus related issues. That means all the tweets on coronavirus from January to March, and amazingly 174 million tweets they have gathered together and available for downloading. So you can search Zenodo, but that search can be actually restricted to the Zenodo contents only. So if you can have a global such kind of thing, all data sets from different repository, we need to use a data search engine, just like a search engine you are using for accessing resources distributed throughout the millions websites. Similarly, we can utilize Kaggle as a data search engine which indexes all data sets available in different global repositories. So this is the difference between the Zenodo and Kaggle. Kaggle is global search engine, Zenodo is a repository. In Kaggle you cannot deposit any data, you can only search. In Zenodo you can deposit, but you can search only the content available in Zenodo. Another important concept is open data commons. As I said, this open data is a part of the open access movement. Previously, there are a lot of open access licensing like Creative Commons, OpenRights.org. They are coming in a big way to provide different other set of licenses. Similarly, Data sets are also available in the public domain against license. This is called ODBL, Open Database Licenses. So before utilizing a data sets or before downloading a data sets for your research, for your information service purpose, you must be ensure that this is available under ODBL. Then next important concept given by the father of the web, Tim Berners-Lee, that is called 5-star data. So what he said, he classified or categorized data sets available in the web in 5 groups. So 1-star data, if the data available in the web in any format, whether open or closed, it does not matter. If it is available in the web, 1-star data. If it is available in a structured data, say for example, you have a Excel file or OpenOffice Calc file, and that file is available as .xslc or in the ODL Calc format, then that is called a 2-star data. So that means data available in the web, but the format may be proprietary. If that data is available in CSV and TSV format, I can utilize any software, not MS Excel or OpenOffice Calc. So that becomes software independent. So then it is called, if data is available non-proprietary open format, that is called a 3-star data. If your data set is available against a URI, so that I can point out the data set, I can point your data sets, it is having a permanent URL or persistent URL, we call it PURL, then it is called a 4-star data. If 4-star data is available as a linked open data, so that I can make a remote query through SparkQL and other related things, I can collect that particular data in a particular format remotely. I can make a query, I can gather data, I can clean data. So that linked open data sets is called 5-star data. And fortunately, in our domain, the leaders of the field like Library of Congress, OCLC, IFLA, all apprehended the possibilities of linked data, and linked open data available in our world is LCSH. The entire LCSH is now available as a linked open data. I can integrate into my local service. Then Library of Congress name authority file, again available as a linked open data. VIAP, the VIAP is an OCLC initiative. All 25 national libraries, name authority files, they gathered together and made it available as linked open data, so that I can link with my local software to VIAP data sets. For example, a few earlier versions of Koha worked nicely with VIAP. So in the name authority file, we can search authority. So VIAP will pop up the name. I can pick up the name. I can select for my authority. But the recent versions are because of some kind of incompatibilities, that is not working. So Dewey.info is an initiative where they are planning to release entire Dewey decimal classification data sets as linked open data. In future, we can link our mark tag 082 with this Dewey.info automatically. The next important concept is called IoT, Internet of Things. Internet of Things again it is not under the purview of libraries, but recently IFLA published one working paper on it, and this actually demonstrated how we can utilize robots for stack rectification, for delivery of services, particularly in circulation section, and how can we utilize drone for document delivery. But still that's a remote future, but you better have some idea about IoT or Internet of Things. But the core concept we are going to need in next two logical section is called API. So API is a set of programming code that enables data transformation between a software system and a remote client. So if you go through this particular picture here, you can see, so suppose this is my local machine, I am making a request. So this is the API. Through that API, request is going to web server, possibly data available in a SQL format, either MySQL, PostgreSQL or MariaDB. So this API will negotiate, this is called content negotiation, will negotiate with the server, will fetch data for me, and will save, will serve data to me. So this is a technology, application programming interface. So many of the software nowadays are giving this API, and What is REST API? So next important thing is REST. REST is basically determines how your API looks. So this is basically the holder. Most of the APIs are actually based on the REST technologies, that is called representational state transfer technology. All the APIs we are going to utilize for our live demonstration are REST API. So API is in short, it's a service through which I can interact with a remote data server to gather information, and most of the APIs are based on REST fashion, are working in the REST fashion, and that's why we call this REST API. Now the moment I make a query in REST fashion to the data server gives back data to me, and that data available mostly in JSON format, JavaScript object notation. So it's a very lightweight data interchange format. If JSON format is available with us, then we can go for different kind of data extraction. So let me try to explain this with a sort of picturization here. So suppose you all know Goodreads.com. They collect reviews, user donated reviews through crowdsourcing, average ratings of a book, etc. So they have got huge millions of reviews and data sets are available with them, mainly deal with the literature, popular literature and classic literature. So they provide a REST based API. So you see how this API looks like. So this is the API reviews.count.json. Then they need an authentication key. You have to register and you will get the key. This is not the real key. I have given a key like this. Then I am making a query for the ISBN. So I have given two ISBNs query, the first ISBN and second ISBN. So I am asking a data from the Goodreads server through API. Now this is the response from Goodreads. So first API or the first ISBN, they have given this data. So this is the ID, this is the ISBN number, this is the ISBN 13. So automatically collected the ISBN 13 in 13 digit. Then what is the rating count, what is the review count, and finally what is the average rating. So average rating of this book, it's an indicator developed by Goodreads to indicate the acceptability of a book on literature by the reviewers and by the readers. So similarly it is giving me a second data sets. So this is the second ISBN number and the average rating is 4.23. So if we want to compare these two particular books on the same topic, or suppose these are two thrillers I have selected. So people actually liked more the second one than the first one. So here average rating is 4.23 and here 4.22. So this data, the entire picture, this is the data server. I am making a query through API. It is giving data to me in JSON format, so that I can extract different kind of this item level information like rating count, average rating, etc. So this is the entire structure, and I can do it remotely. I can do it automatically. I have shown you that I am doing it for the two books, but in actual sense I can do it for millions of books automatically without spending a single second bothering a collecting data manually. So this is the power of data wrangling services. Millions of documents, data sets for millions of documents you can collect almost instantly if you know the tools and technologies. Now another important concept, the concept I explain in this particular slide is called data wrangling. So data wrangling is all kind of skills you need to know for cleaning, structuring, enriching raw data and extracting different kind of meaningful information sets from that data. So you have seen in the previous slide that JSON data is almost nothing is actually it does not mean anything until and unless you extract information. So that extraction information is called regular expression language. I can utilize different regular expression language to extract meaningful data or required data from that JSON data sets. Now next thing, you must be hearing this particular term big data here and there. So big data is actually large diverse data sets that grow at ever increasing rates. So there are three important property: volume, it's a huge in number; velocity, the speed at which it is created and collected, almost unimaginable. So for example, I have given that Genedo is providing 174 million tweets on coronavirus within 3 months. So they have prepared this particular data sets within 2-3 days for the 3 months of data, and that data sets can be of enormous value for sentiment analysis and other things. So the last feature of big data is the variety on different domain specific data, generic data, etc. This data. So there is a debate that whether library data is big data or not. As per the definition, library data is not does not qualify for big data, but who cares? We can still apply different kind of data science tools and technology even to handle our small data sets. So what tool we are going to utilize here? One, OpenRefine, I already talked about. So previously it was called Google Refine, now it is available as OpenRefine. You can download, it's an open source software, you can download from openrefine.org. As installation process is very simple. You unzip that particular file in a folder, you enter that particular folder and run refine one particular script will be there, refine. You will be seeing in the next logical section that how I am starting an OpenRefine server, and they have an excellent wiki that is available from OpenRefine. It's in the GitHub site. So this is the URL, github.com openrefine/wiki. Now OpenRefine or any kind of data wrangling software, they support one particular programming language, or rather it's an expression language that is called Grail. Previously it was called Google Refine expression language, now it is called General Refine expression language. By utilizing that, I can extract collected data through API. It's very fast, very powerful. I can almost extract anything I have received, and on the basis of that I can take a decision, I can prepare a list, I can shortlist a few things, etc. So it can support our research and development in a big way. So Grail supports Boolean functions, string functions, array functions, math functions, date functions, and many other functions. So for us, three important things is that string function, because mostly library deals with the textual data. Then Boolean function is also important to determine a particular condition there. Okay, no worry. So Grail I will be explaining again during the live demonstration process. So let me explain a bit here before going to the live demonstration. So this is a DOI for an article 10.1101 and so on. Now I collected a set of JSON data, particularly open access status of this particular paper by applying REST API technology, and data I have collected from unpayworld.org. Unpayworld.org is providing free open access status data sets for different article having DOI. So you see, I utilize this DOI. They have they actually responded back. This is the DOI. So two are the almost two are actually the same. So this particular data producing different kind of JSON data. Say is OA true, that means the article available in open access. So whether journal is in DOAJ, false. Whether journal is open access, false, and so many things. So how can I extract the open access status and open access color of this DOI based object, that's a journal article, through Grail? So this is the Grail value parse JSON is OA. You see, is OA is here the label. Now it will produce true. Then I also want to produce within bracket. So this is the starting of the first bracket. Then another plus sign. Now within bracket the value will come value parse JSON OA status. So where I can get the OA color, whether it's a gold OA or green OA or bronze OA or hybrid OA, etc. So if I write a Grail in this fashion for parsing my JSON data, it will produce a separate column So this is the DOI value, this is the data sets I have received through API, and this is the data I have extracted. What is the OA status of this article? So it's a true, it is available in open access, and the OA color is bronze. That means bronze means, you know, this is available from the publisher website, free for reading, but not associated with any kind of formal open access licensing. So this I hope that you do understand how we can do it, and this is for a single article, but we can have, say for example, here we are dealing with the 45,000 rows. So within a fraction of second it can generate OS status information for all 45,000 plus articles. Okay, so this is all about the theoretical backup. Let us go for the case study 1. So you already do a little bit of data wrangling, data carpentry, library carpentry, and we already discussed that OpenDefine is a very good data wrangling tool. Previously it was called Google Define, now it is called OpenDefine. So now we are going to show you that how you can download, install and configure OpenDefine for various requirements. Suppose you want to run in a standalone machine like desktop or laptop, if you want to run in a LAN environment, or if you want to run in a in headless mode. So I will be explaining one by one. So before jumping into installation process, we need to check the required software presence in our machine. You already know that OpenDefine requires Java at the backends, JDK. So what I am using in my machine is OpenJDK. So during DSpace installation also I hope that you have utilized OpenJDK. So let us check the version of Java. The latest version of Java is 11, but in my machine I am using Java 1.8 because it is compatible with many software I am running in my machine like DSpace or Viewfind or Solar, etc. So how to check Java version? So you see here it tells me I already have in my machine Java 1.8. Most of you are having, and I am using OpenJDK because entire open source software can be utilized to run OpenDefine as well. So Python is not required for running OpenDefine, but in other webinar related to OpenDefine, I am going to use different other tools for name entity extraction and for data reconciliation. So Python is also a requirement for me. If you are running any Linux box, then Python is already there. If you are running Windows box, then you have to install Python separately. So last 10 years I have not used Windows operating system, so I am now Windows illiterate, you can say. So you check better what is the requirement in case of Windows box, whether you are already by default having it or not. So in my Ubuntu, let me check the version of Python. So Python version, Python version I am having in this machine 2.7, and but the latest one is possibly 3.28, but you can have latest version, there is no harm. But in case of Java, my recommendation is that you still use Java 8 because OpenDefine in the forum somebody reported some problems running OpenDefine in Java 11. And DSpace, I think it is still required Java 8. So this is the requirement. So my machine is almost ready. So let me go to the browser. So I am opening a browser here. So this is the web address you already know, opendefine.org. If you click the download section, so OpenDefine is available in all basic 3. There is this is the latest version, OpenDefine 3.3. So there are other versions available for downloading, 3.2, and you can also go for the archive for other version like 3.1, etc. So OpenDefine 3.3 is the latest stable release, and it is available for Windows, Mac and Linux. So I am now going to the Linux kit. Now the moment I go to the Linux kit, it will be asking me to download this particular file 3.3 tar.tz. So let us download in a folder I have created for this webinar. So now I am going to the folder. This is the folder I have created, 00 BLA OR. OR stands for OpenDefine. Now this is already downloaded. Now I am extracting it here. You right click and extract. It's very simple. Installation process is very simple. It's not complex like DSpace, Koha and Viewfind. So it created one folder called OpenDefine 3.3. Under it there are lot many tools. Now first you see how I am running this OpenDefine without doing anything, without modifying any this refine is the shell script. I need to call this one to start OpenDefine. So I am not changing anything. Let us see what the default thing is doing. So again I am moving to let me go to this folder. So 000 BLA OR OpenDefine. Now you can check that this is the shell script I need to call. If I call now, so it will start in the default mode. That means it is the memory you cannot control, the working directory you cannot control, and it can run only in standalone or machine in a desktop or laptop. So if I click, if everything is going well, OpenDefine will start. So I am just calling the OpenDefine shell script. Okay. So within second you see it automatically started the server and opened up the OpenDefine in the default port 3333 and the default IP address that is 127.0.0.1, that is the loopback IP address of the localhost. So it's you see it's very simple to download, extract and run. But if you want to run this particular, let me close it, and I am also closing the server. How to close the server? It is giving you the status, and when you are running OpenDefine you need to minimize it. You please do not close this terminal window. You need to minimize it, something like that, and you need to work with the OpenDefine. So how to shut down the server? Very simple. They have not given any shell script for shut down server. Simple, you press Ctrl C together. If you press Ctrl C together, your server will be shutting down and you will be back to your parent directory. Now suppose I want to run OpenDefine in a LAN environment, wherein only one machine I will install OpenDefine and other machine can access it from their respective IP address by giving the server IP address. So this is the LAN environment, and I want little bit of control in the memory allocation, because by default it is allocating only 1400 MB RAM, but if you are running in a server mode you need to allocate more RAM. And I want to define also a working directory in place of the default working directory of OpenDefine. So by gathering different commands related to this, let me show you my OpenDefine. So this is the OpenDefine under BLA. I am going to my OpenDefine. So I wrote a very simple script here, and it's a one line, it's not a script actually, it's a combination of different parameters to start OpenDefine. So if I open it, you see what it says. So I am calling the script refine, then I am using -i as parameter to say my server will be running into 0.0.0.0. That means in a LAN environment my server will be available to everybody. Then I want to increase the memory size little bit, so this is the -m parameter. So I allocated 2000 MB, say almost 2 GB, not exactly 2 GB but almost 2 GB, 2000 MB RAM memory I have allocated to run OpenDefine server. So this is a -m. So the minimum requirement is 1400 M, but you can go up to 8000 MB RAM depending on your RAM situation or memory situation. Then you see I have given another parameter -d, so where I have actually declared the working directory for a better control of the saved project. So you are in one simple sentence, you know where OpenDefine is saving the project. This is the folder it will be using to save OpenDefine. So I am using .local under the home folder, under the username PSM. So under that share folder, then OpenDefine, so version 3.3. As I am running different versions of OpenDefine to check different capabilities of this version, so I declare different working space for different versions of OpenDefine. So when you are experimenting, you may need this kind of setup. So let us declare working directory for BLA under local share OpenDefine BLA, and I will show you how to utilize this script to start OpenDefine. I have installed under 00 BLA directory. So I am closing this one. So I am going to home. In the home, to get the hidden folder, you need to press Ctrl H. Ctrl H will enlist all hidden folder. So you see now all hidden folder starts with dot sign. So I need a folder called .local. So it's a .local, under .local share, then under share OpenDefine. So you see I have 3.1 and 3.33. so let me declare another folder here, OpenDefine BLA. Now I am going back to my own OpenDefine so that I can copy this one. You just open a text file and copy the content from there. So this is my OpenDefine. I am copying OpenDefine 3 in the BLA OpenDefine. So you see in BLA OpenDefine there is only shell script refine available. So I paste it there. Then let me modify this. Say for example I want to allocate here, I still want to run in this 00.00. I want to allocate almost 3 GB RAM, and my folder will be under share, it will be BLA. Now I am saving it, but before execution do not forget to change the status of this file from it need to be executable. So I am now opening. So now you can see one particular OpenDefine file is there. It is already executable, still I can double check by giving change mode command. So now instead of refine, I can run this particular script called OpenDefine, which will be running with 3000 MB RAM and with LAN IP address. So another important issues related with this one is, let me minimize it, is to run the system in headless mode. Headless mode means it will not open up your Firefox automatically, and it will consume less memory from the system. So if you need to run this from OpenDefine, in OpenDefine in headless mode, what you need to do, you open your refine.ini. So this is the shell and this is the control file, ini file. So if you can open this one, so you see this particular line is actually controlling OpenDefine to run in headless mode. Java underscore options define dot headless is equal to true. So let me copy this line. Now I am closing this. I am now coming to BLA OpenDefine. Now I am opening refine.ini. So there you see this particular line is missing. So you cannot run this with in headless mode. So if I add this line now here, so define.headless is equal to true, it's a Java option, so I can save it. Now I am ready to go to run BLA OpenDefine in headless mode. So you see this time it will not open up Firefox automatically. So I am now calling OpenDefine. So now you can see 3000 RAM it allocated. If you are running in a server mode, you need this kind of RAM, and here you see it started running in headless mode, and my working directory is now home BLA under OpenDefine BLA. So now it will not open up Firefox automatically. Now I can use the IP address of this server from anywhere to open this refine we have just installed. So if your this server is connected to the LAN, from anywhere you can access by using this IP address. Okay, that's all. Okay, so let us start our case study 2. We already know that how we can utilize data wrangling services or OpenDefine as a data wrangling software to extract average ratings related to user donated reviews for selecting a set of ebooks. Now we are moving our focus to another very important material related to the libraries, that is called articles, journal articles. So in the case study 2, we are going to measure, so it's a very interesting problem. We are going to measure degree of openness in faculty publications of Kollam University, for example, but you can apply that to any institute for any number of years. That means the entire institutional research output can be determined through data wrangling techniques by using an API available free of cost, obviously, from unpayworld.org. Unpayworld.org, you know, that is the largest data sets. They are preparing the largest data sets of articles according to the DOI, and they are collecting status of the article, whether it is available as open access, if available open access, which is the status. That means whether it belongs to the gold path or green path or yellow path or white path. That means we can extract huge amount of data against article DOI. So I am now going to show you in live mode that how we can go for it. For example, suppose the problem statement is that we need to check OS status for the faculty publication of Kolkata University for the year 2020. Now this if you can understand how I am doing it, you can apply the same technique for your institute, and you can apply the same technique for a range of year. That means suppose Kolkata University established in the year 1960, so we can study from 60 to 2020. What is the OS status of academic publications made by the faculty members of this university. Or we can take a bunch of universities, say all universities of West Bengal, all universities of India, what is the OS status. We can go for different kind of comparative study. So possibilities are enormous, and this technology what I am going to show you has a far-reaching consequence for the bibliometric or scientometric research in the coming future. So let us define the problem. We need to collect faculty publication on a given year or a range of year or entire research output, as I said, for a given institution. The collection size will be very high if you select the entire range of years, and it is manually impossible to collect data for each and every article, but we can automate that particular task by using our data wrangling techniques. Now, how to get that particular faculty output? You all know Scopus is there. If you do not have subscription to Scopus, you can request your friend working in large academic libraries. They have access to Scopus, and they can provide you the output. And the output is mainly available in CSV format. You can control what are the elements you want to have, and everything you can customize according to the Scopus download page facilities. There are many filters are there. Now, after collection of the data from Scopus for the faculty publication of a given institute, for example, here we are taking the case of Kolkata University, my own university. Now we need to check OS status. Now Scopus do not give you OS status and OA licensing details. That means if a publication is available, whether a publication is available in OA format, if available, what is the type, that is green, gold, blue or white or hybrid or bronze, and also the license, open access license, different kind of Creative Commons licenses and other licenses. Nowadays, open rights.org is coming in a big way. So different kind of licensing agreement associated with an article can also be collected. But this can be a huge task if your number of articles is very high. Manually it is not possible, but I am going to show you that for a handful of record, how can I do it within minutes. So before that, we need to know Sherpa Romeo color code for open access publication. Sherpa Romeo actually classifying the entire open access publication into 4 groups. If you go to the Sherpa Romeo website, you can have this. So they categorized 4 types of publisher. One is the green publisher, that means they allow authors to archive both preprint and postprint. Blue, they allow only archiving of postprint. Yellow, they are basically allowing an author to archive a preprint version of the paper, and white, they are not allowing anything. I personally believe that white must be black, because they are not providing any kind of archiving facility. So this is the color code of Romeo. So I am going to show you how can we apart from the OS status, how can we also know automatically by using OpenDefine and different kind of unpayable API what is the OA type, that means green, blue, yellow, white or bronze, etc. So this is the methodology we followed. We collected faculty output for Kolkata University for the year 2020. This is available free from publisher because we are subscribing Scopus. As I said, if you are not having access to Scopus, you can request your friend to give the output. Then we exported data in CSV format by selecting different kind of data elements there. I am going to show you in live. Then imported that CSV data into OpenRefine, grouped by DOI availability. You will not believe me that till in the year 2020 many electronic articles do not have DOI. So I am going to show you that how can we group that the availability of DOI or not availability of DOI, because in case of book, as we as we have seen that ISBN is basically acting as the unique identifier for a data object like book. So here in case of electronic article, digital object identifier or DOI is basically acting as a unique identifier. So we need to know that whether this DOI is available, because if DOI is not available, unpaywall is not going to give you any kind of data. Then we registered in unpaywall.org. Registration is completely free. We got our key and we got the API, and that API we have utilized in OpenRefine to extract article specific open access data in JSON format. Then, as you know, in the first case we utilize Grail. So by using Grail we can extract data and can prepare our data sheet, that is the degree of openness of a given university, in this case University of Kolkata. Okay, so let's see first that what we have done and how we can do this. So you all know that already my server is running, so it's better to check always. So okay, it is running in headless mode, fine. So I am minimizing it. Now I am going to my browser and refresh it to check response, whether it is responding or not. Okay, my browser responded in a nice way. So first task, now I am going by task wise, task based take different kind of steps. So first thing first, we need to collect our data first. From where we can get our data? We can get our data from Scopus. What should be the format? The format should be CSV. What should be the elements? You can take different kind of elements, but please remember DOI is the most important thing. So your data filtering must include DOI. So now I am going to Scopus. Our university has access to it, and my beloved librarian Ashita Uda has shared his password with me, so I can enter into in the Scopus. So I am entering inside Scopus. Okay, now you see I can search by affiliation. I can search by affiliation. Now I am selecting here Kolkata University. So Kolkata University came. Then if I search this, so it will produce all the papers written by authors with affiliation to Kolkata University. Now altogether 6091 document resulted. Now as time is short, I am just selecting the 2020 output. So if I limit to 2020 by year, then you see there are 157 number of documents, and this document includes different kind of object these are article, conference paper, etc., book, chapter. So I am not filtering anything here, I am collecting everything. I will check everything having DOI. So now if I go for selecting all of this retrieved paper, then you see CSV export is highlighted. I can select CSV export. So yeah, there are different kind of filtering possibilities are there. So I can select all citing information. It includes author, author ID, and most importantly the DOI. You see here. Now bibliographical information like affiliation, publisher, etc., for the timing we can avoid. Now I am going for abstract and keywords. Then I am selecting. This is also not necessary. We need only citing information, but additionally I am selecting also abstract and keywords because I am also interested in NER, that is called named entity extraction, that I am going to show you in the second part of the webinar or the next webinar. So I am going for export here. So it will ask me to save the file. Select it. Now as we already defined a folder here, BLA webinar, so I am selecting here, say giving file name Scopus KU BLA. Now saving it. So our data collection part is over. Let us check whether it has saved or not. So this is the folder. We given name as Scopus KU BLA. So this is Scopus KU BLA.csv. It is already there. So what next? We can now go to our OpenDefine. So this is the OpenDefine. I can create a project. So I am browsing this. So after browsing, I can go to this desktop. So this is the folder actually. This is the folder, and here it is. So I am selecting Scopus KU BLA.csv. Now open. So you see Scopus KU BLA CSV is there. You already know this step. Now I am creating next. As it is directly coming from CSV, we don't have to worry about it. Last time we exported from Mark, we need to check. So everything came fine. So I am now clicking create project. So altogether you see 157 articles were there. So 157 rows is created actually. Now if I go through this row, let me increase the size little bit so that you can see properly. If I go through this tool, so author is there, then title, year, source title, journal name, that is, and here you see the most important thing, cited by. Scopus nowadays gives also a citation information, but we can also collect citation information through API, but that's a different ball game. Let us concentrate on our task here. So these are the DOI of different articles. We can scroll through and check. So all of this column, this is named as DOI, is having DOI. Now let us see how many of these 157 articles are having DOI actually. So I can select this particular column. I can go by facet, then select customize facet. Under customize facet, the last option is facet by blank. That means the articles for which DOI column is blank. Now if I select, you see false is 152. So that means 152 number of articles are having DOI and true is 5. So still in the year 2025, such articles covered by Scopus are actually don't have DOI. So if I select false now, so that means the articles having DOI. So now you see this is not a 157 anymore, this is 152. So these 152 journal articles are having their DOI and completely amenable for further processing through data wrangling software like OpenDefine and for using API from unpayable. So now what I am doing, the basic steps are almost same. So I am selecting this column, now edit column. Now I am selecting add column by fetching URLs. So that means on the basis of the DOI number and combination of DOI number and unpayable.API, it can snatch JSON data automatically for me. So that's a great thing. Actually previously we need to do it manually. Now everything we can do automatically through data wrangling software. And there are huge possibilities of this these techniques and technologies for future scientific research. So I am now going for history because I already performed this task. Now I am trying to select what are the unpayable. So this is unpayable API. Let me explain this. So it's almost the same thing. So I am using, this is my API. The example you can have from unpayable.org. Then this I am producing. After that I am producing value, that means the DOI. Then after that I am producing my email as a API key. Now what is the result of this one? I can check in the preview. So now you see for the first article the preview says that it is actually amended API unpayable.org, etc. Now here is my DOI. So this is the DOI coming from the value, then after the DOI email. So I am all ready, but before clicking OK I need to give a file name. So I am giving here say OA data, the name of the column, that is mandatory, you need to give one name. So I am giving OA data. Now if I click OK and everything going well, definitely you need to connect your machine internet before performing all these tasks. So this message is connected. So I started connecting API for different kind of JSON related data. So let it work. I am opening another so already 1% completed. It's quite high, but I cannot wait for 100% completion because of the time limitation. So I am opening one particular data set what I already experimented, the same data set. You see almost 3% completed here, but I am going here. So I am now opening a project. So this one is I have completed the same data, same KU data. So here it's slightly more because of the filtering technique. Now I am grouping this. You see data structure is the same. I am going to group this by DOI. Now you see, if I select facet, customize facet, then facet by blank. So here 159 documents are having DOI, because a few more documents we have added there. And after completion, you see here 9% completed here, but this is already completed. So after this one I am getting this is unpayable related data. Okay, now you can see after completion you can see. So this is the first DOI, first article. So open define produced unpayable JSON data, where I am getting this OA is false, it's not open access, and then OA status, if I see OA status is closed. Then different kind of other thing, best location of open access if it is available, who is the publisher, what is the title of the paper, everything. So collection, you need nowadays only DOI of that electronic resource. Other information we can collect, including ORCID ID of the authors, and it's a hugely rich data sets. All authors ORCID ID it actually fetched, then journal name, journal ISSN number, everything. But what we need now, I need the OA status and type of OA. So now I am creating two columns. One is the OS status, whether it is true or not. Then I am creating a type of the material or the type of the OA, like gold, green, etc. So now I am adding a column based on this column, add column based on this. So first I am seeing this column name, I am giving OA true, OA status. So there I am using a GRAIL. So let us use this one. So I am using, so value parse JSON. Just in the previous case I explained that this is the JSON data, I am parsing JSON data, and this is the item information label. So is OA. Now what is the preview? So you see, for the first article this is false, for the second article it is also false. You need to check before clicking OK. Third it is false, but fourth it is true. That means it is working. So it can automatically select whether OA is true or false. Now I can click OK. So it will create one particular column, you see, OA status. Now I can convert this to text for further processing. So I am converting this. It has taken number by default, so it is now text. Now I can go by the facet and text facet to know how many of these documents are true and how many of these are false. So you see, of these 159 documents, 129 documents are not OA, that is false, and only 30 documents are OA. Now if I click true, so now this 30 rows will be uploaded. So these are all open access. So you see here, so in this OA status column all are true. So finally in the 2020, Kollam University faculty members and researcher published a total of 164 Scopus indexed document, of which only 30 is available as open access. Now I am going for the color of this 30. How many documents or articles are available in the gold path, how many of these are available in the bronze path or green path. So again I am creating another column, edit column, add column based on this column, and I am now selecting the GRAIL value. Value parse JSON OA status. So it will produce OA status, and let me give the name of the column as OA color. Now go for the preview. So first one is available in the green path. This is already available in the JSON dataset. I just extracted by using GRAIL, and the next one is available in the gold, so it is working fine. So if I click OK, now you see another column created. Let me again for the double checking, let me convert this into text facet so that I can go for further analysis. So edit cell, common transformation, then to text. So this column is now text. Now I can go for text facet. So let me off this OA status faceting. Now I am going for text facet. You see automatically it can identify how many of these are available in the gold path and how many of these are available in. So altogether 30 articles are available in Goldpath. Bronze is trained. Bronze means that particular article available free for reading from the publisher website, and that is not actually supported by any kind of formal open access licensing. So bronze path includes 10. Gold path includes 15, that means directly open access publication, either in open access journal or the open access sections of a commercial journal. Those are called hybrid. Green is 4, that means it is published in a commercial journal, but the copy of that paper available in any of the open access repositories. So only 4. So I can again click here to see which 4 are actually available in the green path. Then hybrid one, that means published in hybrid journal, and blank, as I told you, that 129. So you see this data wrangling technique, how can it help to check status for articles published by your faculty members, and there are enormous possibility. So let us again go back to the slide. So what are the possibilities of library carpentry? As we already discussed 2 of the case studies, one related to book, one related to article. So what we are presently doing and trying, we are actually new in this particular domain, so we are working for the last 6-7 months. So first what we have done, or what we are in the middle, first one is the poor mark to rich mark. That means we can take a set of poorly formatted mark records or poorly catalog mark records, then we can utilize data wrangling techniques to fetch name authority and subject authority against these mark records, and can repack the JSON formatted data into mark format and can export inside a ILS. So first is that one data set we can export from ILS in mark format, then from we can open it in mark edit, then from mark edit we can go to open define, then we can collect standard name authority and subject authority records on the basis of the given 100 value, that is the personal name, corporate name, all 1xx you can cover, and 650 or 651, all 6xx. So we can utilize the linked open data of Library of Congress, we can utilize name authority linked open data from VIA, and we are presently trying to do it. And if everything is going well, my next tutorial or webinar will be based on this, from poor mark to rich mark automatically. So it's again an enormous possibility for the library data management, particularly for a country like India, where we do not care much about mark records. So don't mind anything, but our mark record standards are not at par. So by utilizing this methodology, we can quickly standardize a set of mark records available in a small scale library as per the global standards. Then we are trying to do a geographical name authority file. You see, Indian place names are covered very poorly by Library of Congress or FAST. FAST, it's a linked open data developed by OCLC on the basis of Library of Congress, FAST, faceted application of subject terminology. So only 2 to 3% Indian place names are covered in this big linked open data sets or big vocabulary control devices. So we collected 7 lakhs of Indian place name, state, district, subdivisional town, up to village level. Then we collected different kind of status. We are in the process actually. It's a huge data set, 7 lakhs of place names. It requires huge computing power. So we are presently trying to collect longitude value, latitude value of each and every place name. The boundary data, that means in case of mark 034 tag, there are 4 subfield: western subfield D, subfield E, subfield F, and subfield G, from westernmost, easternmost, southernmost, and northernmost boundaries, long-led values. So we are trying to do that, to develop such kind of geographical name authority file through API. One of our research scholars is actually engaged with this. Then we are going for integrating this data wrangling techniques with the text analysis technique. Presently we have collected a set of article related with novel coronavirus 19, nCoV 19. Then we determined which are the most cited articles and which one is the most discussed article. So we collected or we categorized all the articles. There are almost 47,000 articles. So 47,000 article we classified in the manner that these are the articles which received more than 100 citations, and these are the articles which are discussed in different social media, altmetrics attention score or AAA score. So we categorize the whole articles into two set and analyzed by using text analysis software. Let me show you one result what we received so far. So this is the NCOP analysis. So of this 47,000 paper, we actually 1979 number of papers got more than 100 citations. The highest citation received by a paper actually goes to 13,000. So we selected all the papers having more than 100 citations. So 1979 papers actually qualified. Then we went for text analysis. So altogether there were 4 lakhs of words. So we selected only title and abstract of those highly cited paper. Then we checked readability. So this is the readability status, that what is the in a 100-point scale. So average readability of these papers are 27. Higher the readability, in fact more it is readable. So less 27 means it's completely at the postgraduate level or high research level. So readability is in that sense poor, but scientific articles are not quite readable. So word frequencies we can determine that these are the words which appeared most things most the frequency of this particular words are very high, and we can create this kind of unigram and bigram visually. So I can select what are the topics, and we can create these are the most important topics appeared in the top cited papers. Then we can go for different kind of n-grams, say bigrams. Which are the two words came side by side most frequently? So respiratory syndrome appeared 423 times in these 1979 papers, followed by acute respiratory, severe acute respiratory syndrome, etc. Now we can go also for trigram. So which are the 3 words appeared most frequently side by side? So severe acute respiratory is the highest, 282 times it appeared in almost in 197 number of papers. So this is the thing we are doing. Again I am going back to this presentation. So definitely what can be done? So future tasks may be sentiment analysis of book reviews as a selection criteria. We can collect reviews, we can go for the sentiment analysis of these collected reviews, and that can be utilized as a selection criteria for books. More data intensive research for in case of scientometrics and altmetrics. Nowadays you see, because of this technology, you don't have to spend a single minute to collect citation related data or altmetric related data for the articles. Rest of the research time you can devote for determining the pattern, different kind of formula, etc. So merging data wrangling with NLP analysis, as I actually demonstrated, so that can be this data wrangling technique can effectively be merged with text analysis techniques. As I said, that highly cited and highly discussed papers we actually analyze through different kind of text analysis. We can identify n-gram, unigram, bigram. We can identify code terms, different kind of topical headings, different kind of subjects dealt by those papers. So future is really looking bright if we survive this coronavirus for scientometrics and altmetric research by utilizing this technology. And what to say, there are many possibilities and we are only limited by our imagination. So thank you very much for hearing this video tutorial. There are many lacuna I already know, particularly audio quality, video quality, etc. But still I believe that content is the king. If the content is producing some kind of good materials, then you will enjoy this video tutorials, and this video tutorial will be available for future viewing also in BLA websites. Okay, thank you very much. See you next.